Hello and welcome to the Petersen Automotive Museum. My name is Leslie Kendall. I'm the chief historian here, and welcome to another deep dive video. Today we're talking about a 1972 Ford Thunderbird, a car that most people don't associate with the name Thunderbird, from a year that most people don't associate with exciting cars at all. But Thunderbird had a lot to talk about in 1972 because that was the year they made the 1 millionth car, and this is it. It's painted a special gold color. It's got 3 special medallions, one on each side of the top and one on the dashboard. That's a millionth Thunderbird. It's a pretty special car. Now, the 1 millionth of anything is pretty special. The 1 millionth automobile that a car company produces is special. But when a car company builds the 1 millionth model of a particular car, that's really something. That's a big company that really hit it on the head when it came to marketing and packaging something that people are going to want. And as it happens, people turns out to have wanted larger and larger Thunderbirds. In 55, 56, and 57, Thunderbirds were small 2-seat personal cars. They were great for getting around town if you only wanted to carry one person. But then Ford said, you know what, this is a great car. It's perfect, but it's just not what we need to make money for our company. The car needs to be bigger. The car needs to be a 4-seater. So what Ford did is stretch the wheelbase a number of inches. They put a back seat in it, and all of a sudden, sales shot up. And sales were up and up and up through the early years, only starting to trend downwards towards the end of 68, 69, and into the early 70s, when Thunderbird got an unusually sculpted body, and from 67 to 71, they had a 4-door available, which is very unusual for Thunderbird, but in 72, they said, you know what, enough with the 4-door, we're going with cars that look like this. What this car is essentially is a Lincoln with Ford trim. It's as big as a Lincoln Mark series and as luxurious and as heavy and as long and as ponderous. But that's what people wanted in the day. They wanted to take the drive out of driving, and the less you felt the road, the more you theoretically liked your car. Now, when you're offered truly special vehicles, you take them. Sometimes they're not perfect, and this car exemplifies that sometimes they're not perfect. Because looking at the vinyl top, you'll see it's kind of blotchy. It's got a lot of evidence of having been lovingly used, we'll say. It's been gently cleaned, but the kind of vinyl that they used in the day ultimately stained. And it's very difficult to get those stains out and keep the top original. So what we do as the Petersen Automotive Museum, we like original over restored. So we kept it original. How many million Thunderbirds are there anyway? Now, when you look at the car, the one thing that really strikes you is its tremendous length. This car is about 3.5 feet longer than the original 55, 6, and 7 Thunderbirds, and it's about 1,500 pounds heavier, 3/4 of a ton more in weight than its original. But that was the market that Ford was going for. They were going for the upper middle class. If the term yuppie existed in the day, I'm sure they would have used it for this car. Now, for 1972, Ford sacrificed aerodynamics to give it a kind of upscale look. Part of that upscale look was a semi-vertical grille with quad headlights set on each side of it. This is also the year before large bumpers were required that literally collapsed and came back and were undamaged in a minor collision. What makes this car stand out among other 1972 Thunderbirds is the way Ford trimmed it. Very subtly, they put gold tone in it with the grille, and they gave the headlight surrounds gold tone bezels too. People will look at this car sometimes and they'll ask, why gold? Why is every anniversary or milestone have to be marked with gold? And that's because gold is a pretty special color, and milestones should be celebrated like that. The millionth Chevrolet was painted gold. The millionth Mustang was painted gold. Checkered Cab even made a gold tone car for an anniversary. So a lot of manufacturers turned to gold when they wanted to single something out and make it really special. Well, why would you call a car a Thunderbird in the first place? Well, when you think about it, in Native American lore, a Thunderbird is something that is powerful. It is all-conquering, it's mighty, and it's something that when you see it coming, you get out of its way. And anyone looking at this Thunderbird will know for sure that it's definitely an American car. I mean, just look how big it is. You have about an acre of sheet metal in front of you, and you've got a 460 cubic inch V8 to haul this mass around. And that's because Americans favored the kind of performance that maybe Europeans didn't so much. In America, a good performing car was a car that could beat everybody else away from the stoplight. In Europe, a well-performing car was something light and nimble that could go around the twisties. If you try to take this in through one of the European capitals, you're going to be kind of out of luck. First of all, you're never going to be able to park it. There are streets you probably can't even fit through. And filling up a tank to a car that gets only 12 or 14 miles to the gallon is a daunting prospect. Now, cars may have been bigger in 1972, but by 1973, that was not necessarily better, because late in the year, the Arab oil crisis came to be. Fuel was simply unavailable, and if you could buy it, it was very, very expensive. All of a sudden, people didn't want cars that got 12, 14, 16 miles per gallon. The Thunderbird was clearly out of its element. But the one thing Ford did do for 1972 was give it that Thunderbird family resemblance. Looking at the rear, you see a tail light that is as wide as the entire car is. You can also, on this example, you can also see the bumper guards that probably indicated this car was meant for city use occasionally, because they were kind of expecting maybe something would bump into it a little bit more than any other kind of car. You look at the side, it's just huge. It's a wonderful, marvelous line. It was very much in keeping for the 1970s. Picture the clothing of the day, picture the furniture and the housing styles of the day. This car fit right in. Something very special on this particular car is the Landau iron. Now, these Landau irons are actually from the 1910s, 20s, 30s. They were a structural part of a convertible top. But later on, they became decorative appliques to a vinyl top or any other top. It gave it a little swoop, a little elegant look to it. But it's not just any set of Landau irons, because this one has the millionth Thunderbird designation right in the middle. Now, a 1972 Thunderbird was as much about decorating driveways as it was about getting you from one place to another. Take a look at all the 1970s flourishes it has. It has a vinyl top for one thing. It's got the white striped tires. It's got the turban-like wheel covers, specially painted with gold on this particular example. It's got a very plush interior, which almost looks like it has separate seat cushions, but they are indeed in leather. Well, the uniqueness of the car doesn't stop with the exterior, because when you open the gigantic door that swings wide, you'll notice that there's a very sumptuous interior that invites you to take a seat and drive down the road. Now, a very wide door makes it very easy for anybody to get in, as long as you're sitting in the front. Swing your legs in, you got a marvelous view of the road. It's almost like driving a cabin cruiser, because you've got this very, very large prow in front of you that you steer and you just watch it turn ever so slowly. Keep in mind that this car was about American roads that were wide and smooth, not the narrow twisties. Well, the interior was about as sumptuous as you could get for a car that wasn't a Lincoln in the Ford lineup. It has leather interior, it's button tufted. The rear passengers even get their own cigarette lighter on the armrest. This is a really spectacularly overdone car, but the one thing it gives you is it's like riding on air, or some people would say it's like driving a double bed. Now, since 1956, Ford had been more aware of safety than just about any other manufacturer. And this car exemplifies that, because if you look on the roof, you'll see a clip, and that clip is for the shoulder belt. What you would do is take the lap portion of the belt off of a clip that's attached to the headliner, bring it down, take this particular buckle, pull up the lap belt portion, put it in, turn it around, put it in, turn it around, and then buckle this entire unit into the latch on the other side. And this is the reason they don't do this anymore, because it's a lot easier to make it a one movement operation by having the lap belt and the shoulder belt already attached to one another. Now in the early 70s, there were a lot of gadgets on cars, gadgets that we take for granted today. For example, power seats. You can move it by a button. You can tilt the rear by another button. You can put up the window with a button. You can put down the window. You even have rear windows, of course, in the back, and they slide rearward. Gives a little bit of a little theater there for people who are expecting the window to go down, but it doesn't. And you can see the windows lock too, so the people in the back can't play with them if you don't want them to. And everything in the day seemed to be either a button or a lever or a switch or something like that. Even the ashtray is operated by a switch. Now, because Thunderbirds were a bird of legend that flew, Ford wanted to give drivers the impression that they maybe were flying down the road in their car. Thunderbirds always had a nice complement of gauges and buttons, and Ford was among the first cars to have cruise control, off, on, set, coast, all operated from the steering wheel. Well, now that you're in the car, you've adjusted the seat, you've adjusted the mirror, you put your seatbelt on if you wanted to. The only thing left to do is start it up and go down the road. And that's what 460 cubic inches of power sounds like to haul around your 5,000-pound car. Well, what about the engine? When you open up the hood, you can see just how big this bad boy was. 460 cubic inches with the 4 Venturi carburetor. About as big as Ford ever made it for a Thunderbird. Now the engine of the Thunderbird is about what you would expect it to look like. It's a gigantic piece of metal framed in all kinds of tubes and ductwork. But this engine isn't the base engine. The base engine for this Thunderbird was 429 cubic inches. This engine is 460 cubic inches, making just over 200 horsepower. 200 may not sound like a lot, and it really isn't, because by then Ford was taking into account all the emissions equipment and the other things that by then they were required to add to the engine. What this car has going for it is tremendous torque. They say that horsepower is how hard you hit the wall, torque is how far you push through the wall. And this car had tremendous pushing capabilities. Now also in Ford circles, you'll hear people talk about Cleveland versus Windsor. Well, this one has a Cleveland engine, and Clevelands were slightly better regarded than Windsor engines. They were considered more powerful, they were considered a little bit more lively, and that is exactly what this car required. For the stylists to get the kind of long line that they wanted for the Thunderbird, they had to make the front extend way ahead of the engine. You look inside and you notice there's a tremendous amount of room between the front of the car and the front of the engine. You're working at about 2 feet. And this is how they looked through 1976. But by 1977, when the gas crisis had really taken hold, Ford said, you know what, we've got to reduce the size of our Thunderbird. It takes about 3 years for any model to be designed and built and get into production. So Ford, almost at the time of the beginning of the fuel crisis, decided, nope, we've got to have a smaller Thunderbird. So by 1977, they were a little squarer, a lot smaller, and considerably lighter in weight. Well, there you have it. 1972 Thunderbird, the millionth Thunderbird ever built. And this car wasn't sold, it was never for sale. It was loaned to a guy named George Watts, who owned serial number 1 Thunderbird. He kept it for a year, then it was returned to Ford, and then it ended up on the open market. But we're very lucky to have it. It was a recent gift to the Petersen Automotive Museum, and we're thrilled. You look at a car like this, and you can't help but notice how big it is. And today it's so unusual to see a car this big out on the streets. You see lots of SUVs, that are huge, but they're not big like a Thunderbird was big. Thank you for watching this deep dive on the 1 million Thunderbird. We'll see you next time.